Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. So today we got something cool. This is the YOUBI XV-130. So it's a 130 millimeter sized. This is kind of an almost ready to fly, where you have to add your own receiver, but it's all pre-built. All you do is add your own receiver, go ahead and configure it, the flight controller, bind it to your radio, and you're ready to go. So for this one, I'm going to be binding it to the radio link transmitter, the AT9 transmitter. This is from a different RTF quadcopter that I'll be reviewing pretty soon. What we're going to do in this review is basically unbox this thing. I've already kind of set this up, but I just want to show you what I did. And then go ahead and fly it. This is going to be like an all-in-one full review. Don't forget to check the links down in the description. I'll have those down there in the description below the video, so you can just see how much this thing costs and a little bit more in depth on the specs. First of all, we have a bag on top. We have an FPV transmitter antenna, and we have two Velcro straps. By the way, this one can take 2 to 4S on the battery power, just to let you know. And then we also have this adapter, which is a JST to XT30, so if you wanted to use some of your JST batteries with it, you can. There were two of these in the bag. This is the flight controller to your receiver. So these are 3x3x4 propellers. They give you two sets in the box. And then we're greeted with the instruction manual. So you know, a basic instruction manual is just going over all the components, showing what you get here. Double stacked flight controller, where we have our power distribution board and our ESCs all integrated into one board. And then we have another board that's going to have our flight controller and also our FPV transmitter all integrated into one board. And this, by the way, is the F3 flight controller, and this is going to take like beta flight or clean flight. And what's cool about this one is it has this little canopy. Let's go ahead and dig further into the box. Cool, so just taking off that top little piece of foam, and check this out. So I've already kind of configured this, and what I'm going to do with you right now is just open it up and show you how I configured it. And that's all that's in the box, is just the quad there on the bottom. This is it, the YOUBI XV-130. Really nice looking little tiny thing. We can see that the carbon fiber here, let's get a little bit closer of a shot here. It is a carbon fiber frame here, and it's not very thick, you know, it's maybe 2 millimeters, so it's a little bit flexy. It may be hard to see on the camera, but these are 1306 3600 kV motors. And we can see that they have the prop nuts pre-mounted, these itty bitty little prop nuts, so you know, pretty light for what it is. We have the already installed FPV camera that looks like it's tilted up, maybe, I'd say that's maybe around like 25-30 degrees of tilt, maybe a little less. So here's the bottom of it. It's just one single solid carbon fiber plate, and everything is stacked on top of the carbon fiber. Here's the screws for the, you know, camera insert, where the camera is gonna basically be glued into. So let me go ahead and open the top so you guys can see inside on this thing. And so what we're doing is we're just loosening these two screws real quick, and this whole body is going to kind of pop off. It's a little tight, so you've got to kind of, you know, push it to get up and around the camera, as well as get up and over this FPV antenna. So you're going to kind of want to squeeze it and pull it apart, and it also has these little tabs that you might need to push to get out. So you can see how I drilled this little hole in the top just for the antenna. And here you can see this little tiny micro RX receiver I went ahead and put in here. This is that radio link one I was telling you about. It's just one single antenna poking up. Anyway, we can see here under the hood we've got the flight controller on top with the built-in FPV transmitter. Now this one does 25, 200, and 500 milliwatt FPV transmission power, I believe. So we can change that by just pushing and holding this button here. You can either change your frequencies and with your channels, and also the power by clicking and holding in. So there's multiple frequencies you can choose and multiple power settings on that. This was the plug here I plugged in for the receiver, and then everything else was already plugged in for, you know, the camera and the ESCs you know, the motor wires were already pre-soldered and everything. You can see there that there's a slight groove in the chassis here. So we'll have to be testing the strength. You know, they'll probably be doing some crashing. But you can see how well laid out this thing is. Very compact, very nicely done. It's got the XT-30 connector, which basically looks like an XT-60 connector. It's just, you know, miniature version of that. It's using B-Heli 20 amp ESCs, it looks like. And here's a little micro USB to plug in and configure your flight controller. Now, I have to say that this one has supposed to have Betaflight, but for some reason I couldn't connect to Betaflight. I could connect to CleanFlight. So I know Betaflight is probably better, but for some reason I was sent with this one that has CleanFlight. If you don't know how to do that, there's a lot of videos out there on how to hook up to CleanFlight or Betaflight. I've already done a few with some of the other quads I've already done. Anyway, so there's the hole I drilled. What I did is I made sure that I drilled it right in the center, so it had kind of the, you know, was farthest away from the propellers, because of course you don't want the propellers to be hitting your antennas and stuff. And here's an example of how you get the top case on. So you see how I kind of put those two notches in the front, and then what I'm doing is I'm going ahead and just, I'm going to kind of squeeze the back here while I push and pull it back over this FPV antenna and just push it down as tight as possible. So that's kind of how you get this top cover on. You know, not the easiest to do, but it works fairly well. These are differently threaded motors. So this is a reverse threaded motor, and so you want to make sure that you get the propeller. If you guys don't know how propellers go, you're going to want to make sure the top edge is spinning into the front, and if it's on the rear, the top edge is spinning into the rear. That's the way this one spins. So we're just putting on that propeller, and then you see how it's a reverse thread where I'm going counterclockwise to tighten this one. And then the other one is normal thread, the silvers. You're also going to need a wrench, so you're going to need some kind of wrench or pliers to go ahead and tighten these, so make sure you have one of those. And here's the clearances, so you can see how close it is there. And there shouldn't be any problem with the antenna hitting any kind of props. You should be fine with the propellers. You know, this, even when this thing crashes, it's going to be hard for it to get in the propellers. And this is pretty rigid because it's sticking up and the body's actually holding it up pretty good. So as far as the FPV antenna goes, you know, I've heard that this one that they include is not that great. This guy here, this is a little monopole antenna. But anyway, this is how it goes on. If you do decide to use this, it just screws right on. Make very sure that you go ahead and screw on your FPV antenna always before you power the craft up. Otherwise you could burn that transmitter out. Anyway, what I'm probably going to be using is like a cloverleaf antenna. I'll go ahead and be putting that on before we do the flight test. And speaking of the flight test, enough talk about this thing. You've kind of seen what it looks like close up. So let's get out there and fly this thing.
Alright guys, so I had everything ready at the park here to fly for the YOUBI 130, and unfortunately I'm thinking this one was a little bit of a dud for me, and I'm going to go through that real quick on what happened here. As you can see, one of the motors is missing, and so let's run through. I did just a little test flight, and I'm going to just run through a little pros and cons. You're not going to really see any flight review in this flight video in this review because of what I'm going to tell you right now. So what happened was I had this whole thing prepped. I have a AT9 radio link transmitter with a little micro radio link receiver. I spent some time to get all that configured in Betaflight or CleanFlight, I forget which one it was. And so, you know, tested in my house, everything was going good. And before the flight review, I decided to just kind of fly a little bit in the park just to get familiar with it before I started filming. And the problem was this motor was loose, and so I was hearing kind of like, it's almost sounded like a propeller was hitting a wire or something, but it was actually the motor wasn't screwed in tight, or they didn't use any kind of, you know, Loctite for the screws. And so I thought, oh, okay, maybe it's just something in the motor, kind of like a defective motor. And then this one flew off while I was flying. The thing tumbled to the ground. And literally it was only about maybe 20 to 30 feet high when that happened, just right here. So it spun to the ground, hit the ground, and then I couldn't figure out, now why is this propeller on this motor that seemed okay, it keeps digging into the shell, you know what I mean? And just from that little 20-foot fall into soft grass here, this whole arm, it actually was, I don't know if you can see that on the camera, but you see this here, the carbon fiber, or whatever this carbon fiber mix is, it's not very strong, and just from that little fall, this whole thing bent up, and it's basically compromised, this whole arm. So my review, not so great on this thing. You know, I do put mine really through the test. I don't try to sugarcoat anything for you guys, and this was a product of you know, bad QC. The motors weren't even screwed in good. I thought I checked these and made sure all the bolts were tight, but if they didn't use any kind of Loctite, that can happen. So, you know, for what it is, I wouldn't really recommend this one. You may be disappointed spending some money in it, and you have the same problems. It just doesn't seem like the QC was so great on this one. And also, you know, the construction, the how strong it is, the integrity of it, it's a little weak, because if this thing's already bending in that short little crash and this whole arm here is compromised, you can't really see anything. That's the thing. You can see maybe a little bit of lamination here on the bottom of the arm. It's kind of cracked here, but there's no like crack on the bottom or anything. It's just the internal integrity is not good at all in this one. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed that review, even though it wasn't any flight testing, and it kind of like lets you know what this thing's all about before you buy one. This may be one to be aware of or stay away from. You know, I hate to say that, but not very awesome in my case, as far as, I mean, you can see the label on top, it says awesome, but this one wasn't awesome for me. Anyway guys, thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next video.